Okay, hi everybody. I am Steve Urquhart, and I am, along with my wife Sarah, co-founder of the Divine Assembly, and that is a religion which has one tenet, which is each individual can commune with the divine and receive guidance. That's it. That's the entirety of the religion, other than what you make of it. Because we are talking about religion and religious freedom, I want to give you a bit of background. I want to worship for no more than 2 minutes. I'll time myself on this. I'll start by saying that I once was lost, but now I'm found, blind, but now I see. That a lot of my life, I've really struggled emotionally, mentally. And I think that in part, I think my religion contributed to that, my religious practices. I think that we are spiritual beings, and I think that my spirituality was just being snuffed out. And part of my story is really struggling and then finding psychedelics and finding tremendous help in that. And I think that that is what great religion can do for us. They can put the pieces together and help us find a better way. And so this isn't just me rambling on about the law. Psychedelic worship is my faith. It is near and dear to my heart. It is something that makes my life immensely better, the life of Sarah, our kids. This is absolutely my faith. And I think that it deserves as much protection, legal protection, as any worship under the sun. And fortunately, it does enjoy the same protection as any worship under the sun. I want to jump in quickly, though, and I'm probably going to say this a couple of times and say that terms and conditions apply. The usual prejudices and socioeconomic advantages and disadvantages, they factor in. And so I realized that a lot of what I'm saying, it's I am in a different position because of the color of my skin, because of my gender, because of my socioeconomic status than a lot of people. And so the reason we're talking about this worship, I'm going to point it towards psychedelic worship, is it is a misunderstood, maligned, and persecuted faith. And it is something that needs legal protection. If you just want to crack open your Bible and read the Bible, if you want to worship Christianity with your friends, you're not going to be persecuted. I know that that's kind of in vogue to say that there's great persecution of Christians. In Utah, there's great persecution of Mormons. That's just not the case. There might be some repercussions, there might be some thoughts and commentary, but as far as government persecution goes, it is so slight compared to what we face to worship with psychedelic substances, with entheogens. So I think that the persecution we face is real. And again, terms and conditions apply to everything I'm going to say. I'm going to talk about how our form of worship is absolutely protected. And I'm going to start out with a warning by saying the police might not see it that way, prosecutors might not see it that way, judges might not see it that way. This is still something we need to work on. And I'm very excited. I'm going to speak to the Bar Association coming up here. I like that we have more lawyers. I like that we have different people getting into this, because I think we end up protecting each other. Okay, first, let me lay out the law. Okay, the First Amendment, that's what most of us know, which is the free exercise of religion. And those protections are real. However, in 1990, the Supreme Court, in the war on drugs, they were looking at a case that involved psychedelic worship. This was a case out of Oregon, and you had Native Americans who were using peyote as part of their religious practices. So this is psychedelic worship, and the Supreme Court didn't protect their worship. And by doing so, it altered what the law had always been in the United States. The law had really been that government should keep its hands off religion, keep its nose out of religion. And so it said, you know what? This is not in these words, but basically it said this is an odd form of worship. It's something we don't worship this way. And it involves a controlled substance. And therefore, we're not going to recognize it and say that drug laws provide enough reason to interfere with this form of worship. And as you might imagine, if you think through this, a lot of religions, they absolutely freaked out on this because they don't want government to look closely at what they're doing. Here I can look out my window, I see the Mormon temple, and my former religion, it does not want government looking in closely what its practices are, what it does in the temple, what it does elsewhere. You have the Jewish religion, you have the Muslim religion. They have kosher and halal slaughter practices, and they don't want government interfering with that, on and on and on. So the religionists of the world, they really rallied. And just 3 years later, with that's warp speed in terms of congressional action. Just 3 years later, in 1993, Congress passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And that's mainly what I'm going to talk about, because the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, it restored what the Supreme Court undercut in the peyote case. Utah just, and I'm going to say RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Utah just passed a RFRA. It became the 33rd, 34th state to have a RFRA. So most states have them. So most of what I talk about is going to apply in your state. The federal RFRA, it does not apply to the states. That was a subsequent decision where the Supreme Court decided that. But there often are, even if you're in one of the few states that doesn't have a RFRA, there are various hooks by which the federal one can apply and often does apply. And also, even in one of those states, sometimes the state constitution, I'm going to say often, state constitutions have really robust protections of religion, because that was always the practice until the Supreme Court undercut that in 1990. So Congress, through code, through statute, fully restored those protections. So then you flash forward. Often Congress, it passes something and we don't really know the effect of it. We don't know how beefy and strong that law is until it is interpreted by the courts. And the first big interpretation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, lo and behold, it involved psychedelic worship. So once again, psychedelic worship was before the Supreme Court. And with RFRA, the outcome was very different. Did I say the year? This was 2006, 2007, and it involved an ayahuasca church out of New Mexico. And we call this UDV, that's União do Vegetal, Union of the Plants. And there, a unanimous Supreme Court slapped DEA and said, what don't you, can you not read? RFRA, it protects worship. And we clearly are dealing with worship here. Give them back their ayahuasca, help them import it, get out of their way. And so a question that I often get is, okay, yeah, we get it. There are religious freedoms. Does it apply to psychedelic worship? Well, absolutely. Had it not been for a case involving psychedelic worship, RFRA would have never been created. And then once RFRA was created, it was psychedelic worship that the court was looking at to say, yes, this absolutely is protected. So check that box in your mind. Is psychedelic worship protected by law? Yes, it absolutely is. And again, remember, terms and conditions apply, because most of the law enforcement you might be dealing with, the prosecutors, the jurors, the judges, they probably haven't tried psychedelics. To them, it's weird. They're stuck in the war on drugs. They don't know the difference of one substance from another. So even though, according to the law, it very clearly applies, they might be quite prejudiced at how they look and see, okay, what are you doing? Are you meeting the criteria to be protected? Okay, I'll just mention briefly that and on our website, thedivineassembly.org, we have links to all of these cases. An Oregon District Court also had a wonderful ruling on ayahuasca worship. And then just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the DEA, it capitulated. It had been sued by Church of the Eagle and Condor that said, we want to worship with ayahuasca. And your rules, regulations, your postures make us nervous. We don't know if we can. And DEA tried to drag that out, It did not want to go to court. It doesn't, let's just speak bluntly, DEA doesn't want to have its ass handed to it once again dealing with ayahuasca worship. So it capitulated. It entered into a settlement decree where it said, okay, Church of Eagle and Condor, you can worship with ayahuasca if you do it in the following ways, X, Y, and Z. But even there, the Church of Eagle and Condor, they were not at all nervous about going to court. They were ready to go. And so they kept telling DA, no, we're not going to agree to that. No, we won't agree to that. Let's just go to court. And so it's pretty milquetoast, pretty weak, the things that the DEA required. Basically, DEA wanted the case to go away. So ayahuasca worship, if that is your sacrament, then you have the most protected entheogen. Just because, again, government has lost a few of those cases and it doesn't want to lose anymore. So those are the holdings of the cases, saying that ayahuasca worship can be legal. And the standards that they set, or it can be legal if it is safe and sincere. And so we're going to go into that a bit, safe and sincere. But then what you do with law is, the Supreme Court, it actually handles very few cases. And so a lot of these things, it's not clear according to one case, okay, this is about ayahuasca worship. Does it apply to mushroom worship? Okay, well, how far out can you go? Does it apply to worship with LSD? Does it apply to worship with toad, to MDMA, et cetera, et cetera? The clear answer is we don't know. But if you read the case and how it applies, then you think, okay, we can pretty easily extrapolate that, yes, it absolutely covers those. I'm a lawyer. I have to hedge and say, we know ayahuasca worship is protected. Okay, check that. But all the other things, is it safe? Is it sincere? That's what the court is looking for. So let's talk about those cases. There you had, three pretty regimented religions, where there they vet the members join a congregation, they know some icaros, they know some songs, they're pretty unified in how they do things. So those are the standards that courts are looking for. Basically, they want something that kind of looks like a Christian Judeo church. They have leadership, they have doctrine, they have some unified beliefs and practices. Do they have certain holidays? Whereas, those of you who worship with with psychedelics, that most of the worship is far from that. That it's not that regimented. So that's mainly what I'm going to talk about is if you don't have, and that might be the wrong word. If someone wants to suggest a better word in the commentary, that would be great. But kind of formalistic, right? Where you wear these clothes, you take the sacrament on this day in this way. And most psychedelic worship does not have near that level of formality. So what let me first talk about those standards: safety and sincerity. I think those are fair standards. Those are wonderful standards. Yeah, rituals. Thank you. That's a good one where everyone shares in similar rituals. If you're not being safe, just stop doing this. And if you know other people who aren't being stay safe, then talk to them, talk to people about them, because we need to keep each other safe in this space. But safety, as the court is going to look at that, they're going to look at, okay, which substances are you using? Are you just using one? Are you using several? Remember, these churches that they looked at, they were using one substance, ayahuasca. And, a lot of us worship with a couple of substances, maybe several entheogens. So that is an open issue before the court. Could they be persuaded that, yes, this is religion? And it's funny, I was recently at a conference about entheogenic worship, and a panel that was talking about exactly this. They were dumping hard on worshiping with MDMA. And so understand again the typical prejudices, the biases that we bring as humans. There are many of you out there who realize, my gosh, worshiping with MDMA, that might be the purest form of worship on earth, that you really can connect with yourself, with others, with the universe. But even this group of people who they were very pro entheogenic worship, they were arguing that worshiping with MDMA would be too far a stretch. And so I found that interesting. Okay, so yeah, here's a good comment. I want to break away from that rigid sort of worship, break down the barriers between source and me. That's what divine assembly is all about. And understand that that gets us into a grayer area legally. Again, my journey that I highlight at the start, I think the rituals, the dogma, there was no room, I felt, I still feel, for me to have true spiritual experiences. All I needed to do was check boxes, where someone else had an experience a long time ago. And I was supposed to follow that exactly. There really was no room, unless I lost my keys or something, there was no room for me to have a personal, disintermediated experience with the divine. And so think about that. That's what most religion is. It is someone goes out and has a religion, has a connection, an experience with the divine that no one else has ever had. And they're like, wow, this is mind blowing. This changes everything to me. This is my religion. I will follow this. And that is a spiritual experience, right? That is a powerful religious experience. Then they found a religion where everyone has to follow exactly what that person saw, right? So they can no longer experience the divine without any filters, without any explanation. Members of that religion have to follow that interpretation of the divine, and whatever the divine told that leader or subsequent leaders, that becomes the dogma. And again, I think that is, for a lot of us, that just doesn't work. Religion for everyone at the end of the day is an individualized experience. What does it mean to you? How does it impact you? How does it make you feel? And so for a lot of us, when we get into psychedelic worship, that just becomes a false paradigm, right? We could, yes, to satisfy potential courts, potential judges, potential juries, well, we could devise doctrine that sounds good. We could do certain things. We could, check some boxes. But then what we're doing is we're straying away from true worship. We're straying away from the things that connect us to the divine in order to satisfy some potential prosecutor or court down the road. And I'm just not willing to do that. And I think a lot of us in this space, we're not willing to do that. We do not want, thank you. Who was it that had that? Laura, thank you for that beautiful comment. A lot of us is religion is where spirituality goes to die. That if we need to follow someone else's interpretation, someone else's dogma, that is not worship. And so the Divine Assembly, again, I'm going to say our one tenet is each individual can commune with the divine and receive guidance. So that is my belief, that I said, hey, we need religion to protect worship. Now you can go off on your own. You can worship, you can do your things, but if you want legal protection, it has to be religion. I should be clear about that. These protections, they don't protect spirituality, they don't protect philosophy, they protect one thing, religion, the R word. Now, part of what I think we need to do is we need to work on having a broader understanding in society that spirituality is religion, right? You look at the case law, it's looking for big institutional religions. What the Divine Assembly is trying to do is trying to individualize religion, that each individual can have religious experiences, call them spiritual, call them whatever you want, that are profound and are worthy of protection. Now, there are some groups that currently can do that. And again, that's if they crack open the Bible and they talk about Jesus. So you look at evangelicals. There's a big movement now for the home church where they're moving away from churches, they're worshiping on their own. Well, that's fully protected. No one's going to mess with it because it's Christian. And so courts are like, oh, okay, we get that. They're opening the Bible, they're reading, they're having experiences. Sure, we're going to protect that. Whereas, again, terms and conditions apply. If people are worshiping with entheogens, which we know can be extremely powerful, would those same judges say, okay, we get that, we get this individualized worship? Or would they be looking for, where's your church? Okay, well, evangelicals, they don't need a church. Yeah, but you do. Because for me to be okay in my mind, you do, because I don't get this and I'm prejudiced against it. That's what we're going to face. So what Divine Assembly has done is, and there are other churches doing the same. So I don't just want to make this a big plug for TDA, because whatever TDA does, it's going to be the smallest speck on the smallest speck of nothing. These are all connected. So there are wonderful churches out there, wonderful groups doing great things. But I'm going to talk about the one that I know best, which is the Divine Assembly. So we do not have dogma. We do not have hierarchy. So what we do is we help members establish their legal rights to worship through certain actions. And again, I hate that we even have to talk about this, right? Because it cheapens worship to say, well, we're going to do these things in case there's a potential judge or jury down the road. But that is reality. That's the reality we face in our form of worship. So we do not have scriptures in the Divine Assembly. We do not have dogma. So what we do instead is we encourage each member to write a creed. And so if you want sacred writings, if you want scripture, well, I can produce mine. And they're ones that I wrote for me. My creed, I do believe it was inspired, just in the sense that, I'm in a contemplative, prayerful state, worship state, trying to think, okay, what are the things that really inspire me? What are the things that motivate me? What are my ideas of the divine? How do I think that I connect with the divine? Who do I want to be? What are the things that I will do, the things I won't do? What is the type person I want to be? So I write that down as a creed. And to me, it's a very sacred document. And a lot of our members have had wonderful experiences doing this. So, yep, like I said, this is something potentially for a judge to read, potentially for a jury to read, but that's not the real reason we do it. It's something to inspire ourselves, because the reality is very few of us will ever be in that situation. It's good to have, but you probably won't use it in that situation. But hopefully, you do use it to set your intentions, right? To integrate these experiences, to be mindful about who you want to be. So that's free. You can do that on your own. Write your creed. Who are you? Another thing is go ahead and join a church. Um, TDA, all you have to do is name an email. And what I love is I'll be walking somewhere and people go, "You're the mushroom dude." And they'll say, I belong to the church. I've never been. I can't do it because of these reasons, but I love it. And it's their church and it has meaning to them. And that meaning is whatever they want it to be. And I realize for a lot of folks, all it is they gave a name and an email because they want to show affiliation with the church for some legal protections. That's awesome. That's perfect, because that's what, at this point, that's all they need out of the religion. So, okay, well, what does that have to do with worship? Well, remember, when they worship, they have to worry about the popo knocking down the door. So it helps bring them peace of mind, set and setting. It helps them put them in a better frame, a better place to worship. So uh, do a creed and join a church, TDA, if y'all want to join. We'd love to have you, even if you never show up. If you show up once a year, whatever, we do have some wonderful events. And I'll point out all of the TDA events are sober because we want to get together and connect. I think that worship is best done in small groups. I think that's where it's safest, where you organically know each other and can take care of each other before, during, and after the ceremony. A lot of good churches out there. Get on the internet and look at them. I was talking with someone yesterday, and he said, "I don't really want to join. I'm not much of a joiner." And I said, "Well, then start your own. That is a very easy thing to do." I help tons of people start their own churches, and it can be a church of you and your partner, you and three buddies. Just put some thinking into it, right? What you want is, in case you're prosecuted, you want to show some steps that you have done something, that this isn't something you just made up after you were busted. This is something that has meaning to you. So, plus, it's a fun exercise. Religion can be anything you want it to be. A lot of you are familiar with the term Santeria, where Santeria, they actually sacrifice some animals. A Florida city tried to zone out a Santeria church. And again, the Supreme Court said, no, that is worship. These people are worshiping the way they want to worship. So you can worship however you want. So get together with some of the people you love the most and go ahead and make up your church. And a church, if y'all remember Michael Scott in The Office declaring bankruptcy, he goes out in the parking lot and says, "I declare bankruptcy." And Jim says, "Nope, you got to take a few more steps than that." Well, church, you don't really have to. It's the really the one organization where, because of the establishment clause, church doesn't want to be too intertwined with religion. You have to do very minimal things to start a church. So if you got down and wrote, "I'm starting this church, and here's basically what it's about." Well, heavens, if you do that with two other people, well, you have a congregation, right? And so if you want to get a little more formal, then you can file as a corporate nonprofit with your state. You can get a tax ID number, and then lo and behold, look at you. You actually are a church. And the requirements for churches are very minimal. You don't have to file that lengthy form to become an official 501c3. You just automatically are. You don't have to file the annual reports that other nonprofits need to file, because a lot of laws are set up favoring churches. So go ahead and jump in line and get those things for yourself. So, okay, creed. That's personal to you. Write your creed. Join a group. join a church, join us if you want, join another one, make something up, and then also participate in that church, right? If it's just on paper, then each of these, a creed can protect you. That's great. Well, it can be a little more if you belong to a church. Maybe that's enough. But it can even be a little more if you then participate in the activities. You help build the church, you help put on some of the activities, you speak, you present. And all of these things hopefully bring meaning and enjoyment in the process. Hopefully, that's why we're really doing them, is because they make us happy. What else do I have? And then, yeah, fourth, live your religion, right? What you have down as your beliefs, that could hurt you if you go to court and will you say these things, but you live completely contradictory to this. What they say is, we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking, if someone goes in and says, I want to discriminate against gays, I'm not going to bake cakes, I'm not do flowers. They really won't spend any time looking to see if this person really is a good evangelical, a good Baptist. They will spend zero time on that. But for the ayahuasca churches, they did. They looked to see, do these people drink? Do they smoke marijuana? Do they? Now, we're not looking to see perfection, but they were. They were looking to see if they really were, if they looked religious. Okay. And then also a couple things we lay out is that it's good donations show that something has meaning. So what we do with Divine Assembly, completely optional. If people want a membership card, then they make a donation of $75, and then they have a card. And there's just something that does to the human mind. I'm a card carrying member of the ACLU, the NRA, whatever it is. Wow, this has meaning. This person carries the card. So for a $75 donation, we'll send you a card with your name on it. That was a commercial plug. That's the divineassembly.org. And that card has actually helped people get out of some pickles. Someone speaks publicly about this, that Division of Child and Family Services knocked on her door, said, we're just here to investigate. We're not saying any of this is true, but we have reports that you're growing mushrooms in the presence of minor children. And so I might not advise this strategy. I think that keeping your silence often is the best strategy. But she said, oh, yeah, this is my religion. You can look through that door. You can see them. That's where I grow them. Here's my card. What do you want to know about my church? And the very next day, the very next morning, they called and said, I've never dismissed one so fast, but we're familiar with the Divine Assembly. We're treating this like we do medical cannabis cards. We're going to close this investigation. We've had good success in courts. We've had good success in front of professional licensing. So again, that card, none of this is an invisibility cloak or get out of jail free card, but all of these things help. So again, whether it is to Divine Assembly or another church, money matters if we do some donations. And then also what we offer is a certificate of ministry. We started this for weddings so probably some of you have performed weddings in your ministers for Universal Life Church. Do we have any of those out there? And so we offered a similar certificate because some governments, they want to see that if you're performing a marriage, a wedding, then show us your ministry certificate. We started out with that. But then we changed the language because we think everyone is born with authority. So here's a piece of paper that says you are a minister. And so we ask people to commit to certain things if they're going to be a minister, that they will work to connect with self, others in the universe. And then we ask them in any way they want to ordain themselves. And so remember, religion is whatever you want. So let's reclaim some of these rituals. Do you want to baptize yourself in the river? What do you want to do? Do you want to sprinkle mushrooms on your head? What do you want to do? It's your ordination, so you get to decide. But isn't that lovely if you're going to be challenged? Say, oh, yeah, when I was ordained, I invited my 5 closest friends, and here's what we did. Because remember, yes, we're playing at this. I hope we're playing at this. I hope we're having fun. Worship can be fun, but at the same time, I hope we're really serious about this, that we're looking to worship, because that is the key thing. I think to show the sincerity that is required, you really have one person to convince, and that's yourself. Religious people look, sound, act religious. And I think, so sorry, here's where I'm going to maybe offend some people on here. When I started Divine Assembly, I was so jaded against religion because, again, my experience had been that it just robbed me of my spirituality, robbed me of my mental health. And, but then when I started worshiping with psychedelics, I realized, God, I think the gods, humans created all of them. And I think everyone on the planet can at least agree that all the gods are created except maybe theirs. They have, so yeah, if you have a God, then your God, I'm just telling you right now, that is the one true God. Every other God's fake. But I think that God is a rat infested crack house with really good bones. And so I think that religion can be something ennobling. It can be something that supports us. It helps others. But I think we create that, just as other bad gods are being created in the pantheon. Let's flood the pantheon with good gods that are loving, that help us connect. And so the state of Utah really just helped us do this. So I'm going to spend, I think, 5 minutes on this, and then I'm going to hit all the questions in the Q&A button below, or at least I'll hit some of them. Okay, state of Utah just jumped into the RFRA game. And what it did, it cobbled together all of the most aggressive, whatever word we should use, protective elements of all the many RFRAs that are out there. And in so doing, it really, I think it's the most protective RFRA in the country. So I think that Utah is now legally, at least on paper, and let's work to make this true, the legally safest place in the world, at least in the United States, to worship with psychedelics. So first off, it did away with 2 of the big standards from the federal RFRA. Federal RFRA said that your worship, it has to be that psychedelics, they have to be central to your religion, central to your sincerely held religious beliefs. Almost like you had to worship the psychedelic itself, which is a bit much. If someone's pointing at the moon, you don't look at their finger, right? Psychedelics, that's the finger. They point us to the divine, to something better. But so Utah just did away with centrality. It says we protect the ability to exercise religion, any part of your religion. Specifically said, doing away with centrality. So that's great. That's a great step forward for us. And then government, they faced RFRA if they substantially burdened religion. Now, Utah still uses that term. But then in the definition section, substantially burden just means if you flick its ear, if you restrain, if you constrain or limit anyone's worship, that's how they define it, then you have substantially burdened their religion. So RFRA kicks in fast in Utah. And so once it kicks in, the government faces a burden. So before they interfere with your worship ceremony, your psychedelic worship ceremony, they have a burden of proof. Now they might not meet it. They might ignore this, but if they ignore this, they potentially face big penalties. We'll get to that in a second. But if they know they're dealing with a religion, and this is why I think religious people act religious. I don't hide. That's what Sarah and I figured is it is wise in psychedelia. Don't have your head higher than everyone else's. We figured we're in a position in life, we're going to stick our heads up high. We're just going to shout this stuff. We're going to do it publicly out there, and maybe that'll make it safer for other folks. But so, my theory is if we say, yes, this is our religion, hold up that God card. Yep, we're carrying one too. They have the burden before they burden your religion. They have a burden to show that their interest is compelling. In that case I told you about, the ayahuasca case, the UDV case, the Supreme Court unanimously said drug laws, that's not a compelling interest. You need to show why you're messing with this person, this group specifically. And because DEA was saying, well, they're drug laws, drugs are dangerous. And the Supreme Court said, no, no, no. Show that their use is dangerous. Their use does not look dangerous to us. They're taking precautions to make this safe. So then, if they can show a compelling interest, they have to go about it by the least restrictive means possible. So this is called strict scrutiny. So in other words, government has a big burden to prove before they limit or constrain your worship. Now, let's say that they just go 5-0, they barge in, they ignore all of that. Under the federal RFRA, the court could say, stop. We're telling you to stop. Maybe in some circumstances, there could be monetary damages against the government, maybe against individuals. But the Utah law is very specific that the government agency that persecutes this religion and individuals who persecute the religion, they could face monetary liability. In other words, the cops, the investigators, the prosecutors, the judges, they could face financial liability for persecuting someone's religion, for limiting it or constraining. So again, they have a big burden that they have to clear. They have to take that seriously. And if they don't, they could lose their cars and their houses. So this is a big, big deal. It's a lot of protection on paper. And again, like I said, terms and conditions, that who would they really go after? And does this person have the financial wherewithal or the connections to stand up for his or her worship? Okay, I bet that prompted some questions, so let's jump into those. All right. Traveling on an airplane, protections when doing so. If you're going to have I'm going to assume you mean psychedelics other than cannabis. Cannabis, there's tons of stuff out on the internet about that. If why would you carry, you're just asking for trouble if you have a lot of stuff in bags that are going to be x-rayed and they're going to go through. So should the protections apply? Yeah, they should. We are also asking for a lot of trouble. So we remember our religion, there will be normal prejudices apply. So try not to travel with these things. Again, if someone's lawyered up and has a lot of money to fight the fight, then you're entitled to travel with your sacraments just like anyone else. But they won't be challenged. You might. Church of Eagle and Condor recently received the go-ahead to worship with ayahuasca without a court case. Okay, so I talked about that earlier. How can TDA be pre-approved for this? We can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars that we don't have. Sorry, that's a shitty answer, but that's the answer. Let me answer it a better way. I think what we can do is we can push and push and push, which is what I'm doing here, which is what I'm doing publicly. We can flood the zone. Sorry about my earlier answer. It is expensive to fight court cases, but I think what we do this is we just push. And what I'm working to do is to talk to law enforcement, to talk to prosecutors, so they know these laws exist. I don't think DEA cares about what we're doing. Matter of fact, we had a chief, one of the people who runs DEA at TDA one Sunday. He was curious. We have a common friend. He loved it. What he said is a minute that DEA spends on psychedelics is a minute they're not spending on fentanyl, opioids, and the cartel. So I don't think we would have any issues with DEA. Let's work with our local counties, prosecutors, our state, make sure they understand the story. And that is what I do. Remember, I come out of government. I spent 16 years in the legislature. And so I do meet with these folks often and tell them what we're doing, why they don't need to worry about us, why legally they can't mess with this. And if they want to mess with us, they know where I live, they know my phone number. Come deal with me, and they better not dare interrupt the ceremony, because they would be causing harm at that point. Hopefully I redeemed myself in the original flippant answer. Can we email our creed to TDA so that there's a date and record of our intention? So I think that's a good idea. Go ahead and email it to yourself. Yeah, go ahead and, you can mail it to yourself in a sealed envelope. Then they'll have a date stamp. I don't think we need to be overly paranoid about this, but yeah, it's a good idea to share with someone. And if someone wants to help with this, TDA, by the way, if y'all want to start your congregations of TDA where you live, just go ahead and do it. You don't need anyone's authorization or approval. It has that one creed, which means you're in charge. You get to figure things out. But if someone wants to help out, so on the website, remember, scriptures would be nice for us. And I don't want scriptures, I just think it's against the tenet to have scriptures that say, thou shalt not. But like the book of Psalms, which is where our name comes out of, by the way, the Divine Assembly, if we have creeds up there to inspire each other, that might be a cool thing. And that's kind of scripture, right? If we have it as an inspiration. So if we want to organize some of that, if someone wants to do that, to where we put up some creeds, have a library of them, they can have names, no names, whatever people want. That could be cool, because I love when people share their creeds with me. I find them very, very inspiring. I recently watched a video related to the Church of the People for Creator Mother Earth, and video federally recognized church. That's funny. Or is there any way that the federal government recognizes specific churches? No, in case you don't know it, I'm very candid. What that is, if someone says they're federally recognized church, we in legal terms we call that bullshit. Now maybe, and I don't know this church, and so maybe if they're a Native American church, with a registered tribe, maybe there's a process there. But if this is a psychedelic church, no, you have UDV, you have Santo Daime, you have Church of the Eagle and Condor. Those are the only three. And so, Soul Quest, I'm going to name names. For years, they said, oh, we're recognized, because they had exchanged some correspondence. And again, going back to the legal term, that was bullshit. So people say they're recognized. They're not. There isn't a process to do it. It's through court. It's through very expensive cases. All right. Besides the personal creed and membership card, what other ways do you recommend we protect our religious worship? Okay, so let's go over those again. Creed and card, you can get a certificate of ministry. I see someone deleting these, so that's probably Sarah. Don't delete this one, because I haven't finished reading it yet. And then join a church, participate in the church, and then also, some financial support of the church. I think those were the main things. I keep a journal of the original experience. Perfect. Those are your scriptures for yourself, right? That's your book of Psalms. Would it count as personal scripture? Absolutely. Write down those religious experiences. Because if you are tried, you don't want all of your flaws and warts to be up there. You want this to be, who are you in your religious best person, right? Well, this is who I am. This is what really inspires me. You know how it works when you've known someone forever, but you read their writing, when they write something serious, you're like, wow, I didn't know this person was this deep. I didn't know. I love reading my friends' writing. So yeah, these things that you're writing to yourself, very important. Thank you for that. I mean, that's a creed, right? I think I'm being too formalistic. A creed is, what does this stuff mean to you? What does it show you? Thank you for that, anonymous attendee. At a previous meeting, you very briefly mentioned that you limit the, thank you. I have that in my notes. You very briefly mentioned that you limit the amount of mushrooms you keep within your home. What is the limit? Okay. Also, protect yourself. I'm a Texan. I like guns. I don't have any guns in my house because that would be a cheap add-on. I don't have many substances. I don't have big volumes. I grow mushrooms, as y'all know. I make the mushroom kits, which, by the way, I think that's the safe way to worship. Grow your own mushrooms. Show that you have that connection with your sacrament. I keep just very minimal amounts, and so my mushrooms, mostly using the caps to do spore prints, and then I give away a lot of mushrooms. So if you need mushrooms, talk to me because I don't want them on hand, and I'm happy to give them to people who are worshiping. Okay. I'm not aware of it. If someone said someone said they're busted for growing mushrooms. Oh, I don't know this. I mean, there's the one case, that I said where someone was busted, had her card. I know that down south some things are going on. I don't really want to comment on those other than people are lawyered up. They're working on it. Uh, yeah, someone growing mushroom. No, so someone growing mushrooms and being busted. I don't know a thing about that. If someone wants to email me, I always would like to know that. When I started Divine Assembly, I contacted the prosecutor in my county and said, I'm starting a church, a mushroom church. Here's why you shouldn't be concerned. Here's where legally you can't be concerned. If you want to bust someone, bust me. Do us both the favor. Look and see if we're having a problem in this county with mushrooms. So I had his chief deputy look into it. They're not going after mushrooms. They're adding them on. If they bust someone for X, Y, or Z and find mushrooms, they'll add that. They're not targeting mushrooms. So yeah, if someone was busted for growing mushrooms, then I guess you said it's on Mighty. So I don't get on Mighty. I'll check that out. Let's not make a lot of this stuff. Uh, uh, yeah, if you want to message me, I would like to know who that is, what that is. Okay, Scientology, religious protections. Yeah, same thing. Scientology, they have a lot of money, and religion is protected, whether it's Scientology, whatever it is. If you're sincere in your beliefs, and Scientologists are sincere in their beliefs, so of course they are protected. So yeah, court went after them saying that they're abusing the monetary provisions and all that. They won a lot of cases. I talked about Universal Life Church, that all that is sign up and you can perform marriages. They have been uh, persecuted. The IRS has gone after them a number of times. They've won those cases. That's the way it mostly works in the United States. Is there isn't a way to say, hey, government, will you look at us and say we're officially a church? They're going to, if they want to challenge you as a church, which they rarely do, they will bring a case. And that's how you prove it, is you prove it by defending a case. Now, some churches like Eagle and Condor, they will seek declaratory judgment. They will bring the lawsuit, but that's the way you do it, is through a court case. Now, Brazil, it's a different process. So I'm thinking that TDA should be officially recognized in Brazil. And I think we should put together a roadie and go experience some of the wonderful things going down there with psychedelic worship, and just Brazil being awesome. In Canada, we have someone talking about getting an official religious waiver there. There isn't such a thing in the United States. Now, Soul Quest, because of its nonsense, it has some very bad case law that it has helped create. But I think it might only apply to Soul Quest. But the DEA, there is no process. They have no authority, but they're trying to act like people need to go to them for a waiver. No such process exists. But stay tuned. They might try to put one in place. Okay. Okay, so this is people like me who are very public. Why have you not been raided by the police yet? I would think that if one were to publicly declare their use of psychedelics, police would want to raid you, since it's kind of like shooting fish in the barrel. Okay, I'll give you I'll answer that directly. I'll give you kind of an indirect answer first. When Utah passed its medical cannabis law, the legislature, before it took effect, rushed in and kind of gutted it in large part. And so, in having it take effect immediately. So I called the Salt Lake City police chief, Mike Brown, and I said, "What are y'all going to do with this new law?" And he said, "Well, the ink isn't even dry yet. We don't know." I said, "Well, it's law. I'm talking to a group in a couple days. Will you get back to me? Will you take a look?" So he got back to me and he said, "Now cannabis is pretty unenforceable. So what we're doing, and I don't know if this is what Salt Lake is doing now, if someone has 4 ounces or less and they say that they have a card or they have a card, then we're just going to let them go." And so I said, 4 ounces? And so I said, "That's a lot." And he said, "I thought you were for this stuff." I said, "I am, but a quarter pounder's a lot." And so I just moved up to Salt Lake and he said, "Welcome to the big city, Steve. We have real crime that we need to worry about." And so a lot of these places, they have real crime. And so if I'm growing a few mushrooms in my house, they don't have time to mess with that because they know that no one's being hurt by that. But out on the streets, people are being hurt. Okay, now let's get a little more personal about it. Remember, I said terms and conditions apply. I'm white and I'm a lawyer and I have resources. So, uh, you know, Divine Assembly has people of color who belong. Um, they don't show up to a lot of our meetings, and so I like talking personal, saying, "Tell me your experience," and they don't show up because they are people of color. And terms and conditions apply. The typical prejudices, socioeconomic factors, they apply. So part of it is I have resources, and you know, who knows? Maybe they will come after me, but I think they would lose the way that you know, I'm set up, the way I'm doing things, and they know that I could put up one hell of a defense, and they don't want to lose cases. So, you know, if someone looks, so this is part of what I can say to all of you: don't be an easy bust, don't go in like a schlub. And so this is why you want to protect yourself, because if they look at you, you might want them to think, a prosecutor to think, "Dang, we could lose this one." And so that doesn't always mean you won't be prosecuted. Um, but what you want is you want to give them a wrinkle, because we have to think this way, unfortunately, with our church, that go after someone else because I have protected myself. Okay. Okay, I think I did that one with Scientology. The court cases that decided in favor of ayahuasca seem, yeah, they had more structure than TDA. Does that raise any possible concerns with churches that are more secular in their orientation, less ancestral or indigenous than the one the courts have decided in favor? This is a great question. Another example: would the courts be more sympathetic to a Christian church that use psychedelics in their rituals? Exactly. So these are brilliant questions. You guys, you already know all this stuff. Um, the the Supreme Court, unanimous Supreme Court case, UDV, Santo Daime, that was the Oregon District Court case. These are Brazilian religions. And so these were offshoots, these were sects, parts of it in the United States. Well, if you've ever been to Brazil, if you know anything about Brazil, everything in Brazil is syncretic, right? That's the way they have their food. They serve it separately, but then mix it all together and eat it. And so their religions are very syncretic, a lot of things. Both of those had strong Christian elements. And so that is part of the reason that Chacruna and other folks wanted to support Church of Eagle and Condor. It does not have any Christianity to it. So this is the first win, and we can call this a win because DA, no matter what they say, they knuckled under on this. They did not want to get their third loss. That does not have Christian elements. So the other part of the question was if it is more secular. So this is a concern. I want to say this again. This might be the third, fourth time. Divine Assembly, we have one tenet. I think this is the purest core of religion. It's you and the divine can figure it out, that you are entitled to commune with the divine and receive guidance. What is pure religion than that? However, courts, when they look at what is a church, they look at indicia that have been assembled by the spiritual giants at the IRS, none other than the tax collectors. They're saying, when we look for a church, we look for these things. And what they're saying is they're looking for congregation. They're looking for hierarchy. They're looking for clergy. They're looking for shared songs. They're looking, they're looking for what you would see when you go to a Christian Judeo religion. And so this is why we need to work for ours, and that is individual. TDA, I think they would look at us, we absolutely would pass at this point. If it had been a month in, a year in, well, all we are is a jumble of contradictions at that point. We have no track record. But 4 years now, where we get together in many locations every week, those gatherings are sober. They really are. It's not a wink and a nod. And the things we talk about, this really is religion. This really is worship. So TDA, we would check that box. Now, you individually, because this is a disintermediated church, would you check that box when they look at you? Because remember, they would. It's not enough to say, I'm evangelical. You don't get to say that. I'm a member of TDA. You have to show that it has meaning to you. I had another thought on that. I'm going to pause for a minute and think, because I think it's a good one. Oh yeah, so this is, hey, so any of you who are out there thinking you want to start a church, did I mention this? Look at Chacruna, CHACRUNA.net or whatever, Chacruna Institute. My friend Allison Hoots put together a great guide. It's a guide for entheogenic churches. That's the main thing I do when people say, I want to start a church. I'm read Allison's book, read Chacruna, Guide for Entheogenic Churches. It is a spectacular resource. So what I do when people want to start a church, I say an entheogenic church. I'm like, you're not going to have any track record for a few months, for a few years. What you might want to do is start it on the TDA platform, where you say, I believe in this tenet. And so as such, I am starting my church. So you get our 4 solid years, our 4 good years of showing that we are a church. We really are sincerely worshiping. It's kind of a fun thing. We have different beliefs, right? But we're getting together and we're kind of worshiping the idea of worship. And we're holding space for each other to do that. And so I say, we can seed you. This is, again, an evangelical thing. They seed other churches, that we'll start a church over here. We're meeting in our living room. Why don't you go meet, bring in your neighbors? And so I love that TDA can help seed other religions. Start it on our platform, what we do, and then develop your doctrine, your beliefs, your practices, whatever you want. And then a month, 2, 3, a year, 2, you'll have your church, and then do your thing. Again, you don't pay us anything. We don't get in your way. We just want to help people worship. And again, I'm going to go back. The reason I do that is it has changed my life. It has saved my life. I believe in worship, and I believe in worship between me and the divine. So I want other people to have that disintermediated form of religion. Okay, is TDA a 501 or 508 nonprofit designation? I've been trying to understand where to start on a 508. This is someone who wants to start a church. You're familiar with 501c3s. Those are typical nonprofit. There really isn't a distinction between a 501 and a 508. 508 is just another part of the section that says churches automatically are nonprofits. That's what 501c3, because 501c3, you read that and it starts out, I think, first sentence or two, saying churches don't have to do this. Most churches do, because they want to be on the list of exempt organizations to receive those donations. Because if you're not on that list, then the burden of showing that donations are tax deductible would be on the individual taxpayer if you're not on the list. So that's just accounting stuff, but a 501, 508, they're the same thing. I know people try to distinguish them. Those two sections say the same thing, which is churches do not need to file the lengthy form to be a nonprofit. How about the synthesis of your holy sacrament? I don't know what that means. Maybe clarify that down in the bottom, the synthesis. I'm going to answer what I think it might mean, but I think it makes sense anyway. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Whoever provided that. Who is that? That guide right there. Allison Hoots did that. She's brilliant. She started something, the Sacred Plant Alliance, which is now it's 12 churches that they peer-to-peer review. It's really a best practices. I've talked a lot with Allison, but they're kind of looking for hierarchy structure that TDA doesn't have, nor will it ever have, because we're about the individuals, and that is the start and the beginning of our religion. But she is great. That is a good guide. Okay, I'm going to answer this synthesis of Holy Sacrament. I'm going to answer that, which might not be the question, in terms of polysacrament. That if you're worshiping with a couple of different substances, does that count, or does it just need to be one? Does it just need to be psilocybin? The case law, everything that has been addressed, remember, it's been one sacrament and it's been ayahuasca. So what would a court do if it's ayahuasca and mushrooms and toad? And we don't know. But again, normal prejudices, you can see that a court would start to quickly think, you're just taking drugs. You're just taking any drug under the sun. Huh? Oh, go to the bottom of the questions? Oh, okay, because someone clarified it. Thank you. Synthesize your sacrament probably means make your sacrament your home chemistry. Okay, gotcha. But I'm going to answer on poly one, and then I'll get to that. Okay, so I make no bones about it. As sacrament, I list in my creed psilocybin and 5-MeO-DMT, toad. Toad has changed my life. I'm not going to bear testimony on it, but if the point is seeing God, these are my sacraments. Now, there is some hypocrisy in this, because I should list 7 different sacraments. The reason I don't is because I'm worried about a court and a jury, right? And so I need to sort that out in my own mind. But the more substantive you have, the less likely it is that they'll be protected. Sorry, sucks. Because we know, those of us who do this, there are many paths that can get us to the Holy of Holies. Why did Utah pass a religious freedom law? How does it protect, support us? Okay, I think it passed it because Mormons and evangelicals believe that they're being persecuted. I don't think they're being persecuted by government. But I think we talked a lot about that. So I'm going to move on. Is it accurate to say that our rights to use psychedelics in worship? Here, one second. What? Oh yeah, the census one. Sorry, people. So where was that? Probably means make your sacrament your home chemistry lab. So I think if you grow mushrooms, yeah, I'd be willing to take that one on just fine. I think that's very organic. Here I'm taking, weeks, months to do this. I could fight that one. If you're dealing with beakers and stuff like that, again, what's the court going to think, right? It's just, all we're doing is trying to get into the mind of judge and jury. At that point, it would be attenuated, is what I'm going to say. So you look at some of the more chemical ones, LSD, MDMA, they might be less apt to be regarded as sacraments. All I'm doing is just trying to get into the prejudices, the blindness of judges and juries at that point. Okay. Okay, yes, this next one. Is it accurate to say that our right to use psychedelics in worship are not fully upheld until our specific case is litigated? Yes. For example, in my, yeah, you're at risk until it's until you go to court, and you don't want to go to court. So you can file you can try to get a decree on this, but again, that costs all the money in the world. Unless you're really good, then you might lose it over a procedural thing. Again, SoulQuest went forward thinking it was going to, threw back its shoulders, puffed out its chest, because it was going to fight for something, and it really failed miserably. And let's hope it doesn't hurt the movement. So, people who, yes, I'm going to take it to court, man, I hope you have all the money in the world and great lawyers, because that's what it takes to win. So yes, you are at risk with this form of worship, again, because of the prejudices of society. This law is going to be great. We need to breathe life into it with discussions like this, with rallies at the Capitol if they mess with it, by conversation by conversation. Yeah, are there safety tests courts might seek regarding different substances? How many different substances? Remember, these judges, they probably have never done psychedelics. And so it's going to be new to them. Prosecutors probably haven't. So remember the first time you were thinking of doing psychedelics, it probably was a scary thing. And so they're coming at this stuff fresh. So we have a big responsibility, opportunity to educate society around us. Okay, so how much do people care? How much do authorities care about catching people using sacred mushrooms? I don't think that's a high priority to them. I think this was asked before I addressed that. It would just be a cherry on top to go after mushrooms. I think if you really are, if you've secured your religious rights through the things that we've talked about, and you can show that these mushrooms or whatever your substance is really is part of your religion, then I think it's, you don't have big volumes, you don't have a lot of different kinds, you're a law-abiding citizen, and then unfortunately these things will factor in. What is the color of your skin? Where do you live? What is your job? How much money do you have? All of those socioeconomic things. Some people are more protected than others just by who they are. It's not right, but that is the way it is. Okay, a couple people have asked this: how much would you keep? I'm always under an ounce. So that means that I'm getting rid of them fast. Occasionally I'll get more than that, but I just, again, I think I probably do have a target on my back because of all of this. So I don't want to give law enforcement a cheap, easy bust. If you don't have any target on your back, then maybe your volume could be a bit more than that. Being safe with your worship, test your stuff, especially, if you didn't grow it, and then really protect anyone you're working with. If people are preying on others financially, sexually, or all that, I hope they go to jail. Let's take care of each other. And if you're taking care of the people around you, and part of taking care means if someone is struggling, and if for whatever reason they need to go to the ER, get them to the ER, right? But again, that wouldn't come up if they were taken care of beforehand, if they're taken care of during the ceremony. But we don't hide. If someone gets in trouble, we take care of them, right? And we'll worry about consequences later. Okay, wow, this is a great question. What are your thoughts on how RIFRA applies to me having my children practice along with me? You're going to have to decide that. You're going to have to answer that for yourself. And how much is it your religion? This is really a topic of conversation now. It's an important one that parents in this space, let's have some evolved discussions, more than we can have over, I'm trying to get through all these questions. I think we're approaching a place, maybe we're to that place where religion is something that families practice, and children can be more involved in this. Now, remember, we have a disfavored form of religion that would freak the hell out of judges and juries. So just realize you're running a bigger risk. But that's the thing. You read these religious cases, what often wins it is that the defendants, they act religious. They're not pretending. They do certain things knowing they're running a risk because that is their religion. Their religion compels them to do it. So that wasn't a complete answer, but that's something parents think about it. Have the discussion. Man, if you do it, write the hell out of that in your creed, right? And be sure that you're taking great care of these kids in terms of prep and integration, all that. But understand, if they're talking to kids in school, which they will, this is how it works. And what do you do if you're saying this is our religion? Don't tell anyone. That's not great. So, you know, DCFS, they might want to be involved in this, right? They get scared. They don't understand these substances. We should have a Zoom on this topic. How do we involve our kids in our religion? Great question. Thank you. Okay, is it safe for TDA to be combined with other religions? Still part of another religion because I feel that maybe, okay. So maybe unsafe for me to leave. These courts, they really want one religion because, you know, that is your religion, right? They're used to this mindset that you belong to this team. If you belong to this team, then you don't go to this team. Again, if you're evangelical, well, you can go to all sorts of different evangelical communities and discussions and all sorts of different Christ-centered churches. But we have it a bit different. So, you know, I know a lot of people, they have this certificate, this card. I think the more you have, I think the more you weaken your case, to be quite honest. I don't think you're strengthening it by saying, I belong to these three religions. So from just the lawyer speaking in me, I think one religion. But again, we can have this kind of Brazilian syncretic thing. That's why I say TDA, it fits with any other religion. It could fit with Mormonism, right? If you believe that you have that direct connection and no one stands between you and the divine, which that isn't Mormonism, but if you somehow believe that, then yeah, this fits whatever you and the divine bring to it. Okay, online purchases of supplies. How careful do I need to be? You know, I really don't think that anyone's monitoring mushroom purchases, or, you know, at least supplies if you're going to grow your own, because remember, they're huge shipments of a lot of dangerous, deadly stuff. I will point out, California, Georgia, Idaho, those three laws, they say that spores are illegal. I ship to those states because I think that, you know, religious rights trump that. Who knows? I might have to account for that someday. If so, okay, I'll do that. But you'll notice, even though I think that our sacrament is protected, I don't ship sacrament. I don't sell sacrament. I know that some people do, and God bless the suppliers. God bless people who are helping others worship, because I think I have a rather sizable target on my back. I try to take a pretty conservative stance in terms of how much I have and what I'm doing with the actual sacrament. So, who are the major influences blazing toward religious liberties protections in the state of Utah? It's a lot of people. Fun things are going on in Utah. There are a lot of different churches and groups kicking up, and, you know, TDA, I'm going to say rah rah TDA, we're doing our thing. But really what it is TDA members. They feel empowered. They feel like they are making their practices more defensible. So they're going out and doing bold and courageous and wonderful things. But TDA is not the one true anything. There are many great groups, and I hope we fit in. I hope we're a good community player and fit in with them. So hats off to all of the other great communities in Utah and around the country who are doing things. If you want something more formal, let me throw this out again. Look at the Allison Hoots and some of these churches that belong to the Sacred Plant Alliance. I know that what we're doing, kind of the individualized thing, some people want more structure. So maybe look there. And also be careful. There are some bad groups out there that I think are robbing people of their autonomy and hurting some people in various ways. So let's talk back and forth. There's a group out there, Entheos, the Entheogenic Safety Council. They're starting up, so we can talk back and forth and talk about who's safe, who's not. So Doris Lee, I don't know if you're on here, but thank you for your work on that. Godspeed. Let's get going. Okay, how do people get their sacraments to sacred sites? They stick them in a car and drive. But I assume maybe you're talking about flying. Just be careful, because remember, TSA, they probably didn't attend this talk, so maybe they're not as up to speed. And if they see a bag of mushrooms, then there might be a conversation that ensues from that. But if I'm somewhere in Utah, then I'm not worried if I have quantities on me that relate to a ceremony, because I will deal with that. That is a part of my religion that I'm plenty fine to face consequences for, and fight the fight to worship. Okay, worst case scenario. Yeah, just remember, police in this scenario, I like law enforcement. I always supported law enforcement in my 16 years at the Capitol. I think that they have a hard job to do. I'm glad they're there. There are some bad apples. So that's who we're going to worry about. And they're ones who are going to try and trick you, all that. They're never your friend if they're coming with a warrant. You just don't talk to them. Just say, hey, all due respect, I've been advised I'm not going to talk to you. So just don't say a word. You don't need to point out anything. Don't need to be rude. Don't need to be snarky. They have a job that they think they're doing the best they can. Just, that's the main thing, is just don't talk. Because anything you say can and will be used against you. That really applies. And you'll have time to explain it later. You'll have time. It's not the time when the police say, but remember, I told you, what I would do, despite having said that, I would say, this is my religion. You need to be clear. You're persecuting religion. I'm going to show you my card. I know it probably won't matter to you. I want to have it on record that you have seen this, because I think you're going to answer for this. We have a law protecting my religion, and you need to stop. You need to stop right now. And, I would try to get a court involved, but I'm a lawyer, and maybe I'm an idiot. But I think the best advice typically is just keep the mouth shut. Okay. Yeah. So in the gun world, there are companies that allow someone to purchase insurance that will pay the legal fees if one were to get into a situation with a firearm. Has TDA ever thought about creating something similar? To be honest, we have not. There are many things we're working on, and that is not one, because part of it is, this is individualized experience, meaning we're going to do educational things like this. We're going to show that TDA itself is a religion. Beyond that, you need to keep yourself safe. So if individuals can get that insurance you're talking about, that would be something for them to do, because we don't certify. Oh, and then we cut off. Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay, so I hope we can save these questions. Am I even close to the bottom? Because I will answer all of them. I'll go through. So Sarah, if you're listening to this, if we can save the questions, I think these are great questions. I would like to go through and answer them and think through and learn while I'm doing it. I think we might be cut off here in a minute. So I'm going to say thank you all. This was tons of fun. Let's do this again. Keep each other safe, and let's worship. Let's secure for ourselves and for others these beautiful worship rites. Thank you. God bless.